Well, Razorback fans, it was a question posed to me about coaching stability. If a coach is leaving in the middle of spring, does that show a lack of stability? Well, let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Neighbors. I am also the host of the John Neighbors Show, which you can catch every weekday afternoon from 4 to 6 on Natty State Sports and nattystatesports.com. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. You're the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further. Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Tuesday. It's spring football. Is actually going to be continuing on this morning. As if you want all the up-to-date information and the great practice reports, be sure to check out nattystatesports.com as well as all of our social medias because we're going to have a lot of good stuff for it. But overall, it's still going strong. You know, there's still some curiosities, especially considering that there's going to be a new running backs coach out there on the practice field today. And don't really know. I mean, it hasn't even made official, which is funny, that it is going to be Kolby Smith. It looks like he's the guy. But again, just waiting, seeing, hoping, wishing, and seeing if it actually happens. But either way, there's a lot of questions and concerns, rightfully so, about what the running back room is going to look like, if there's any players transferring out after this point in time, you know, whatever it may be. But I wanted to take the approach of a question, or at least from a question that a lot of you have posed to me, or maybe some comments, I should say, that you've also posed about the possibility of a coach like Jimmy Smith leaving, showing the lack of stability and him getting out or just bouncing off the Titanic before it starts to sink. Because in some people's minds, that's how it's viewed. I mean, what other reason could there be for a coach who's been here for a long time at Arkansas leave after the second spring practice to go to a place like TCU and take the same position? Running backs coach. There's got to be more to it. There's got to be a reason behind it. And it's a legitimate question. It's the one I had, and I talked about it last week, or I guess yesterday, on the podcast. But the question also becomes, is by that being the case of him leaving, does that show instability? That show a lack of a program that Sam Pittman is building or is about to let fall loose, or I mean, coaches are like, hey, man, this sucks. Let's get out of here. You know, what could it mean? Well, I'm going to look at it in two different ways. I'm going to look at it in more of the optimistic and more the pessimistic way. We'll start with the pessimistic way. Pessimistic way is looking at it as, okay, well, you're losing a coach, and any coach that leaves at this point in time for the type of job that he's leaving for has to be something bad. It has to be because this is going to be a horrible season, and there's a lot of major issues going on. Because what other reason could there be? What other reason would there be for a coach to take this stance and to go this route? And if you're somebody that has that opinion, I'm not going to hate on you for it. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. Because let's be honest, at the end of the day, none of us truly know what's going on behind the scenes. Sure, you may hear some stuff on message boards and whatnot, but nobody truly knows what's actually going on. But it is a bad look considering the type of year that you are coming off of, considering the new offensive staff that you put around, and considering just the timing. So if that's truly the case, Jimmy Smith, who's been a great coach and a great recruiter, if he just went into spring and was waiting for an opportunity to jump somewhere else, then he got it and he left. And I have a hard time believing that there weren't other jobs that possibly came open for him or other opportunities that came open for him that weren't just as good, if not better, than TCU. I mean, you're talking about a coach who's pretty well known as being a good recruiter and always had some really good running backs at Arkansas. So why in the world, when other big-time programs not be interested in him? Surely he was getting some calls. But maybe as soon as the season ended and maybe as the time was going on during the winter months, especially after Petrino was hired, he looked at it as, okay, well, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to try this out. And in the early part of spring, and when they started getting going, he started realizing, I ain't doing this. This is a bad deal. This is a sinking ship. I want off. This is going to be a bad deal with a bad culture, with a bad deal with Petrino, a bad deal with all the coaches being on different pages and different areas. Like, this is something I don't want to be a part of. So anything that pops up, I'm going to start talking to people. Ooh, the TCU job opened up. I know KB. I know Kendall Browse. Yeah, hey, man, hire me. I'm there. Gone. See you. I think that's a possibility. I truly do. I hope it's not, because if that ends up being the case, then this is going to be a troublesome and tumultuous spring season heading into fall camp. That's the pessimistic view of it. But the optimistic view of it, and maybe the one that I'll always look at because it's just who I am, maybe the optimistic view is that this was a particular coach who had been weathering the storm of losing his assistants around him, or his fellow assistant coaches around him in the offseason and from this offense. And when Bobby Petrino walked in, knowing the type of person he is, the demanding, high expectation, you're going to do it my way or the highway type of mentality, he may have walked in and said, okay, these are what you're going to have to do, coaches. Assistant coaches, these are what you are going to be responsible for. And some coaches may have been on board with that, and some coaches may not have been on board with that. And when they decided to not be on board, or if they decided to not be overly helpful, then it was like, okay, maybe we need to, this ain't going to work. This ain't going to work. Because Petrino brought in his own his wide receiver coach, essentially, a guy he knows. Eric Mateos was brought in in the offseason and around the time that Petrino was hired, but I think that's more of I think that's a thing that Sam Pittman in dealing with him more so than will be Petrino, but still it will be a group effort. And the tight end coach with Morgan Turner, as far as the impact that they has on the offense, is pretty small overall. So I believe that there is just a certain element, a certain expectation, and maybe it was like Petrino's like, hey, if this guy ain't going to come along with it, then we need to do something else. Or maybe he was making his life so much miserable that he's like, I can't do this. I can't deal with this. And then he moves on. Now, when you hear that, you're probably like, well, that usually means the bad thing, right? That he can't handle it and he wants to move on. Maybe. Or maybe it's going to be the best thing for both parties. Maybe. Maybe he didn't like the way it was done, and maybe he's like, okay, I'm moving on somewhere else. Okay. And because of that fact, maybe Kolby Smith coming in, because he knows Petrino and he knows the connection, knows the expectation, he looks at it as, all right, well, we got rid of this guy that's maybe not on board, maybe doesn't understand it, doesn't know what our expectation is. I got somebody right here, right now. Come on. Be the guy. And because of the connection there with Petrino, it's going to be a more fulfilling and a more successful partnership and relationship from the offensive coordinator to the running backs coach. Now, I don't know if Kolby Smith can recruit really highly. I don't know if he can develop. I don't know much about him, to be honest, other than just where he's come from and that he's been Petrino's guy. But it all comes back to this, folks. It all comes back to this. If you're wondering if this is going to be a good thing or a bad thing, if you're wondering if this is a good sign or a bad sign, ask yourself this one question and be honest with yourself about it. Do you trust Bobby Petrino? Do you trust him? Do you trust him to make sure that the decisions on play calling, the decisions on who plays quarterback, the decisions on what packages to run, the decisions that he makes with this offense, do you trust him to make the right decision? If you say yes, then you should just be okay with this. And if you say no, then you may have a concern. But Bobby Petrino, at least in my eyes, maybe I'm naive, but in my eyes, he is someone who's earned the benefit of the doubt with me until he gives me a reason not to believe in him. Until he gives me a reason not to believe that he is going to do a great job here at Arkansas as the offensive coordinator, I'm going to go ahead and assume he's going to do just fine. So we'll wait and see. But it's as far as it being a bad sign, doesn't have to be. But let's be honest, when you lose like Arkansas lost last year, it's hard to think positive about anything at this point in time. But it possibly could change. Folks, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further, ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capability to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class-exclusive Google built-in is always updating your assistant to call on from almost anything. And gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is a perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. You can also check out the 2024 Nissan Armada, which will change exactly what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 people in first-class luxury and style, tow bigger, and explore further in the 2024 Nissan Armada. So take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. SEC tournament is going to be getting going for Wednesday Night Sadness here tomorrow. We know that. Arkansas's playing in it. And you got a lot of other conference tournaments going on and a lot of rumors going on in college basketball. But I'm just going to tell you right this, just from guys I know and people I hear, like Curtis Wilkerson, Scotty Borderland of United States Sports, they do a great job covering all things basketball. So they know a lot about this, and also other people I've been hearing from in the college basketball landscape. This offseason has potential to go completely and totally off the rails when it comes to coaching carousel. And when I say off the rails, I'm talking about coaches that you would think have no chance of leaving, they leave. Coaches that end up getting jobs at places you kind of roll your eyes at, oh yeah, it happens. Coaches that aren't happy in their situation, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, today, at least at the recording of this podcast, there were rumors that Porter Moser was going to go from Oklahoma to DePaul. Now, he came out and says the rumors aren't true, I guess, on Twitter, so maybe that put the end to that. But there was still a lot of smoke to that fire. So it's going to be a fascinating offseason. This could be one of the craziest offseasons you'll see in the coaching carousel, as well as transfer portal and everything, which is kind of sad. College basketball, more so than even college football, was a sport of where you just had iconic, legendary coaches stay at one spot forever because they never had to leave. They built it into a machine. You think back to the days of just 10 years ago. And some of them are still around, but you think about Bill Self at Kansas, Coach K at Duke, Roy Williams at North Carolina, Tom Izzo at Michigan State, Jay Wright at Villanova. I mean, these are coaches that were at blue blood programs that stuck around for a long time, forever. Jim Calhoun at UConn. Coaches were around forever, especially if they had success. Because, again, in a college basketball, it felt like because of the only amount of players that you needed to make it work and to be successful, it was easier to build it into machines and to build it into a monster that you could easily feed. Because all you had to do is just keep getting players that were solid or highly talented and make it work together, and just you're already ahead of the game in most cases above other teams because you always had that. You always had the recruiting, and sometimes 5-star players would stay a few years. But that's changed. It's changed so much when college basketball is going to be impacted more so than anything because you have so many teams out there, so many things with NIL, so many things with coaches not being happy with their current situation. It happens. But it comes around to Arkansas. And people keep wondering about Arkansas. And with Eric Musselman, about the smoke and fire that's going around as far as is he going to stay? Is he going to go? Because there has been a lot of speculation about that. And my whole opinion on the matter is I hope Muss doesn't leave. I hope he doesn't. And from what I hear now, at this point in time, now I'm hearing that he's leaning towards staying. Now, is that because of Arkansas doing something for him to make him feel wanted and eager to stay? Or is it maybe because some of the job or jobs that he was trying to look forward to having and wanting to jump on board with aren't really looking at him right now? I mean, I don't know. There could be a lot of reasons behind it. But the fact is that a lot of these speculations for other major college basketball jobs don't come from nowhere. They don't come from just out of the blue and, people having to say, oh, no, it's this, it's this. There's reasons why. Sometimes it's because they actually are leaving, and sometimes it's maybe because they want to put pressure on the school that they're at currently to make some madness happen, make some more things work. Could be a plethora of different things. But I'm just trying to tell you and prepare you that this college basketball season, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty for everybody in college basketball, but even Arkansas fans. You're going to have a lot of uncertainty. You're going to head into this offseason where pretty much every player is going to be going. I don't think Caleb Battle comes back. I know what he said, but I don't think he comes back. I hope he does, but I don't know if he does. Everybody on this roster is going to be different next season, pretty much. And you could potentially have a new coaching staff. Potentially. So think about what that will do. Think about how different that would be, the difference it would make going from that perspective into this perspective. Feeling good and great about everything to not so much. It could really change you and make you feel a certain type of way about it. Again, I hope it doesn't happen. I hope Muss stays. But it's just really hard to put a finger on what is actually going to happen because everything's just ever moving and everything's so fluid. And that's, again, it's not just an Arkansas thing, it's a college basketball thing. Chaos is upon us and uncertainty is upon us. And hopefully you're all just ready for the madness that's about to begin because it's going to be here really quickly. Folks, FanDuel, say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets with FanDuel.com/lockedon.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, and I wanted to bring this up because, I guess it is warranted to be brought up, and we wanted to talk about something that was on social media because former Razorback tight end DJ Williams made a video about, a video response to what some of the Razorback offensive linemen were doing in part of the Hogs Plus videos. Like one of those videos after practice where they're kind of goofing around a little bit, having some fun, some social media clout. Start singing and dancing and kind of goofing a little bit. And it got a lot of people's attention because DJ Williams was feeling like there should be no fun like that. And a guy, Fernando Carmona, just said, Bobby, he's my boy, Coach Petrino, and he didn't like the way that he mentioned him as Bobby. Like there was a lot of commentary and discussions about who's right, who's wrong, like who's doing what. And I wasn't going to respond to it, but I feel like it's warranted because I know a lot of the offensive linemen are doing a podcast with me here at Natty State Sports called the Boss Hog Podcast. It's really good, by the way. And also because it was so much so that Eric Mateos, the offensive line coach, needed to kind of make a snarky tweet about it. But here's my thing. I don't care. I do not care. I don't care that DJ Williams has an issue with it because, again, I don't have any problem with DJ. I don't have a problem with him saying what he did. It's his opinion. He's a former player. He can say whatever he wants. And I also don't have a problem with the offensive line doing what they did. Because here's the thing. No matter what happens in college sports, but it's the sports in general, really. Folks, if you're winning, nobody cares. If Arkansas was coming off of a 9-3 season or an 8-4 season last year, and that's what the offensive line was doing, you would not care. No one would care. They'd just think it was all great. But because that they came off of a 4-win season, and because there's some uncertainty, and because people don't feel great about the whole situation, it's kind of like, ooh, oh, yeah, this is bad luck. They need to be focused on practice. They need to be focused on this. It's the second day of spring practice. Like when that video came out, that was the second day of spring practice. Spring practice. They're college kids, and they're really close. The offensive line is a really close-knit group. My thing is like, hey, if they go into this year and say they struggle, say if they don't do very well, say if they have the same issues as last year, well, guess what? It's not going to be because they made a fun little clipped video for Hogs Plus back in mid-March, getting ready for spring practice. That's going to have no impact on how good of an offensive line this is. But at the same time, it's not going to make them great at the offensive line position either. So why does it matter? It should matter. What matters is winning. But I get it. When you lose and you're not very good and you struggle, you're going to be amplified. Everyone's going to have a magnifying glass on you. Like, I get it. But I just don't understand why it even matters one way or the other. Who even cares? It's spring football. They're college kids. They're just being themselves. Just go win. You go win. I don't care what you do. I don't care how much you dance or how much you sing or how much fun you're having. Just go win. That's what I want. That's what the expectation is. That's all it needs to be. Appreciate everybody listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Neighbors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.